All right. Welcome in to another episode of the Hockey Royalty Podcast, the official podcast of hockeyroyalty.com. We got the same familiar faces in here. We're going to be talking the World Junior Championships, what's going on around the Pacific, the new affiliation out east, some key signings here in the minor leagues. How much do the fans trust the Kings front office, and who needs to prove it on the ice? Stay tuned to find out. All right, guys. New intro by your fellow co-host here, Russell Morgan. How you doing there, Russ?
I'm doing pretty good. I can feel the hockey. It's just around the corner. I think we're only about just over 3 weeks away till we get some Kings players playing on the ice with the rookie faceoff in mid-September. So I'm excited.
It seems like a decade for most Kings fans because they want Dursey and Mikey Anderson to be signed. but yeah, it's just right around the corner. Joe Paterino, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Randon. It's I had the privilege of the scent of the ice rink, and that was Russ. You've been in rinks and stuff. Just when you walk in, there's that smell of the ice rink with the hockey team that I coach, the high school team at our kind of summer camp last week. So it was nice to be able to kind of just get in the rink again, on the ice, around hockey again. So like you said, Russ, we're kind of around the corner here, so it's starting to get fun.
Yeah.
How you doing, Rando?
The smell of stale pads and desperation. No, I'm doing good, man. I just got back from vacation. Obviously, we didn't have a show last week, but I was on vacation. It was in Miami and all of South Florida, knocking 2 more stadiums off the list. So now I got 27 down, 3 more to go to complete all 30 teams.
Nice.
So it was good. I mean, Tampa was fun. The stadium was okay, but very underrated. Miami Marlins, great stadium, very modern, very clean, felt homely, good beer selection. And what I like about it most was a lot of stadiums have like a cookie cutter food selection, right? Like, I mean, Miami had the dogs and the nachos and stuff, but there were like, Cubano sandwiches, there was pulled pork stations, there was, burritos and stuff like that. A lot of the Hispanic heritage was throughout there, and I like when a little bit of the local stuff gets brought into the ballpark. I think that's the biggest pet peeve I have with the new Rangers ballpark. It seems like I'm walking through a mall with a baseball field in the center, and like Miami feels a lot more authentic to the area and just feels like a good homely baseball field.
Did you drink your beer out of a hot dog?
Out of a hot dog? No, that's not my go-to. Don't really recommend that. But there was some good local brews there. I got burnt at the beach. The hat is the only thing covering, not that my face is, 13 feet high on anybody's TV screens, but I'm peeling everywhere underneath here because I got burnt on my fair skin. So, but it was well worth it to be on the beach in Miami and having fun with family. So yeah, it was good. It was a good time. But, I'm ready to talk some hockey with you guys. Got to get the Kings fix in here. And before we get the Kings, though, we got to talk about the division. So let's start with around the Pacific. There was some key news since the last time we talked, some big signings and a big injury. We'll start with the injury here with the most hated rival there in the desert, being in Vegas. Robin Lehner out for the season, the only goalie really of note within the organization. And now are they in desperation mode with an early injury that injuries routed their last season, and the guy between the pipes is gone? What do you think, Joe?
I don't know that I'll go so far as to say desperation. I don't think it's an unfair question. Perhaps I'm a little bit higher on Logan Thompson maybe than most. That said, I don't think he's necessarily ready to start 60 games or anything like that. So very interested to see what they do between the pipes. Boy, for somebody, they're making me look like an idiot because I was pretty high on Vegas coming into the season. And listen, talent-wise, I still think if healthy, they're arguably the best team in the division, but we all know injuries happen and they have no depth, and it's getting put to the test already between the pipes. So maybe desperation is a little strong, but I don't think it's unfair.
As they say, when you go all in, sometimes the house wins, and the injuries have been getting the bug for them. Russ, do you feel like Lehner is the linchpin for them to make it to, the Stanley Cup? Like, he would have to obviously play at a high level. Do you think Thompson has that ability? Do you think they make a trade to maybe one of the premier backup goalies in the league? How do you feel like the team is going to handle this? Because the organization hasn't been shy about making aggressive moves.
Yeah, I don't think Vegas is necessarily the type of team that needs to rely on goaltending. I mean, when you have the superpower up front, like Eichel and Stone and Marchessault and then Pietrangelo in the back and Martinez, I mean, they have enough firepower to be able to withstand some, I guess, average goaltending. I mean, look at what Colorado was able to do with Kemper. So, I mean, it's not necessarily going to be the biggest issue, but I mean, to win a cup, I mean, you do have to get some big saves. So it'll be interesting to see. I still think that Vegas makes the playoff. They still look like a playoff team on paper, even without Leonard. But it's in the playoffs is when you're going to need some big goaltending, and that could be a problem for them.
Yeah, it really seems like maybe like we were talking about with the Kane a couple weeks ago, it might be like a deadline. Wait for a team that has a decent goalie to get lower in the standings in the tank for Bedard sweepstakes, and then go after their goalie to make a run for the playoffs. In a positive light, switching it around, a team that seemed in the dumps right after Gaudreau goes to the middle of suburbia, that team, and then the threat enough to Chuck leaving. Now their team's looking pretty strong, right? You get Huberdeau, you get that huge trade. Now you're bringing in, Kadri at a 7x7 after the season he had last season, which seems like a pretty fair deal for him. The Flames don't look such in a bad condition in the fact that they will probably be near the top three, if not in it, in the Pacific next season. Russ, I'll start with you on this one. How do you view this signing, and how well does he fit with what Sutter wants to do as a head coach?
Well, I think Kadri and Sutter just feel like a match made in heaven. That's the exact type of player that Sutter loves to coach. Kadri's always felt like a good two-way player. I mean, he brings a lot of tenacity. We saw in the playoffs, there was a great storyline with him all throughout. So it was just good to see his play style kind of really take to the forefront, especially for a team that went on to win the cup, because he deserved it with everything that he went through, the threats and all that. So it was good to see. And now that I think he found a good home in Calgary. The thing that Joe and I had the discussion actually after the pod last time we got together, what our thoughts were on the Flames, and that was before the Kadri signing. And at that point, when they made the trade for Huberdeau and Weegar, I didn't think they were a playoff team. I mean, they did really well for themselves, I think. I mean, considering where they were at with losing Gaudreau and having to get rid of Tkachuk, I thought obviously you bring in another 100-point scorer in Huberdeau and Weegar, who's probably a top 4 defenseman in NHL. That's a pretty good replacement. Now that they have Kadri in, I still don't think they make the playoffs. That's just me. The thing with Kadri, it's hard. It's hard to define it's hard to see how he's going to be on a team like the Flames, where it's more defensive. Kadri just put up career numbers playing for a team like Colorado Avalanche, just scoring 5 goals a game. So, and the thing with like that we talked about, Joe, last time, the Flames don't really have that big number 1 defenseman who's going to eat up minutes for them and play big minutes. He's not. I mean, you look at all the last my thoughts on it. Where you look at all the last few Cup winners, you have the Lightning with Hedman. You have Colorado with Cale Makar. I mean, the Kings, when they won, they had Drew Doughty. I mean, all these teams have this number 1 defenseman to lean on in big moments. And say what you will about Hannafin, say what you will about Anderson, and even Weegar now, I just don't see it. I envision them being maybe a wild card team at best.
Joe seems baffled. What do you think?
Yeah,
I agree that I don't know what to listen. I think it's a little unfair to expect another 90-point season out of Kadri. Fair. Yeah. I think they did about as well as you can do, replacing Gaudreau with Huberdeau. Similar enough players, probably reasonable to expect similar production. We talked about how Tkachuk was a unicorn, really tough guy to replace. And while Kadri isn't an exact replacement, boy, that's about as close as you're going to get in the short term. Like long term, obviously, age, years, whatever. That's for the short term. I think they have the best defense core in the Pacific Division. I tend to I kind of agree, Russ, that they don't have that ace, right? Although I just all I'll say is don't be surprised if we look up halfway through the season and Uyghur is that guy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised to see that be the case. But their depth in the blue line, they're really good. Now that they got Kadri, I think we talked about how teams have come back to the pack. No team has really, propelled themselves up from where they were last year. I think Calgary is at this point. I think they're the favorites in the division right now. I think they have a top 2 goalie in the division. They've got the best 1 through 7 defense core in the division. They replaced as well as you can do the offense. I don't think they're done because I think their cap situation is still a little. I don't think they're over the cap. I think they're just under. So we'll see. Maybe they have something minor to come, but it's hard to say that they've gotten much worse. I guess I don't know that they've definitively gotten better either, but I don't think at this point, I think they're the favorites in the division. I don't see a weak spot on the team. Russ, I think your point's well taken that they don't have that, 2012 Drew Doughty. They don't have Kel McCarr. They don't have that guy Pietrangelo. But again, I think the depth of the core, plus I think we may see a bit of a coming out party for Uyghur. I think his role could be even bigger this year. I love this team. I love what they did, and I give full marks to Tree Living because you could have easily tried to go a different direction, and he said, "The hell with this, I'm going for it." And let's not forget, like maybe down the road, these contracts. I don't know if there's ever a good 7 or 8 year contract these days in a cap era, but it is what it is. You got to sign these guys. It's what you do. You have to do it, I guess. But they got a first and a prospect too in the Tkachuk deal, so it wasn't as if they mortgaged the future or anything like that. Like they did a pretty damn good job, all things considered. So, all's that to say, we've talked about this, and I maintain that this is going to be a dogfight of a division, and it still is. I will just say that I think Calgary did enough to stay the favorites in the division. I think they did enough.
Richard comes in saying, I can see 4 teams making the playoffs this year. The Pacific is very strong.
I think the Pacific's stronger. I don't know if it's.
I agree.
The Pacific is stronger, but they had a long way to go to catch up to the Central. So I don't know yet.
I'm with you thinking that the Central. I mean, I think there could be 4 or 5 teams coming out the Central this year, and only 3 teams from the Pacific. That's what I think. I mean, you just look around the Pacific Division. Seattle's going to be a little bit better. I mean, they were pretty much on the bottom dwellers, and then they added a bunch of players. Burakovsky's one of them. The Ducks are going to be the Ducks. I mean, you got still a lot of young players, and we'll see if they fall into the Bedard sweepstakes, and also with the Sharks too. They might actually just tank. I mean, we're going to see a lot of teams just totally forego this season. We just got done with the World Juniors where you saw Bedard do with all this magical stuff he was doing. So all these teams are watching. It's like, let's just forfeit a year and maybe try our hands at getting a franchise player. Why not? So, but I mean, you still have the Oilers are going to be much better. I think the Oilers are going to run away with the division. I really do. I mean, I think goaltending was one of their few weak spots, and they got Campbell, and then you bring in a full year of Kane. I think that team's going to be pretty studly. So Vegas, I think, is going to be much better, and the Kings are going to be better too. So the division is better. It's not the best, but in terms of just going back to Calgary and why I think they're still kind of a middling playoff team around the 9-8 spot, I'm not as high on Markstrom as you guys are, and I think a lot of it also has to do with the system that they play. I know Sutter is more of a defensive type coach, so he's probably getting a lot of shots from outside the blue line or outside the point, and not a lot of high danger chances. Because I mean, his goals saved above expected per 60 was like average. I know Jonathan Quick even had much better than he did. And Uyghur, I mean, he's a great defenseman. I really like Mackenzie Uyghur, but can he be that top pair defenseman? It remains to be seen because he was playing behind Ekblad and some other good D-men over in Florida. But I mean, you look back, he played 23 minutes a game and he got 40 points in an 80-game season. So can he be that offensive D-man that they need, or are they going to win games that Sutter way, just 3-2? And so I think that'll be something to watch all year, and also how Huberdeau kind of transitions from this pure offensive role where he's playing with Sasha Barkov, where Barkov can kind of take a little bit more of the defensive responsibilities. And now he's playing on a Daryl Sutter system where now he's going to have to focus a lot more on defensive responsibilities. So that'll be another interesting thing to watch. But I mean, for me, losing Goudreau and losing Tkachuk especially it's just a huge loss, because I think Tkachuk is honestly probably top 20 player in the NHL. So it'll be a fun team to watch, though.
It'll probably be a test to see, because I think just stripping away everything else, like player for player, they did pretty well, all things considered. But then you factor in these kind of intangible type things of Goudreau and Tkachuk they were Canucks, right? They were Canucks. They were Flames. They were Calgary Flames, right? So you're bringing in three guys that now are coming into their first year and have to totally adapt to everything, right? Brand new, where they're coming from, Florida, where it's just totally a totally different scenario now of where they're coming from, or Kadri's case coming from Colorado, to where that's an adjustment. These are still human beings. They have a life adjustment, their families, whatever, that are coming up. They have to move. Huberdeau's got a huge contract now that he has to kind of live up to. So there's these kind of, how do you measure these type of things that we don't know, and perhaps they play more of a negative effect than maybe I'm giving it credit for.
Yeah, we want to get to the Kings here, so let's move on to the World Junior Championships and how that went. Obviously, Canada wins the gold in overtime, 3-on-3, and just miraculous overtime highlights that I saw. Didn't get a chance to watch it live. The haunting of Ducks prospects hits Kings fans right in the face, with Mason McTavish making a beautiful save in the glory moments, having a good tourney there. Let's go with takeaways here. I'll start with mine. Is Casper Simon Tybalt for the Kings? Like, he's constantly one of these guys that just peeks his head in during the key moments in these World Juniors, and sometimes they're in for his home team. But like, this is what Scott Wheeler had to say, and he said, quote, "Makes plays into space with the puck on his stick, often to himself when defenders step up on him. One of those tiny players who excels in playing in front of the net on the power play. He can play on the wall, but pivots into the pockets, and the way he handles the puck around the crease really lends himself to be the screen position. Made a ton of little plays at the post and around the net. He was good, as he usually is for Team Finland." And like, to me, obviously this doesn't translate into the team now, but it's desperately what the Kings need, right? Like, it's the Kings need a power play threat in the crease. You saw Jad step up for the Reign last year. And I think it's nice to have one of those guys that is just kind of that small guy, gritty guy that has a good scoring touch. I've always been a fan of his. I'm glad they had another good tournament. I'm gonna toss it over to Russell. Like, what was one of your big takeaways from the World Junior Championship?
Well, the final was just ridiculous, and that I'm glad Finland ended up making it a game, because it seemed like Canada was going to run away with it at the beginning, but they ended up tying it, and then it goes to overtime, which I'm not really necessarily the biggest fan of 3-on-3 overtime in a gold medal game. I mean, I'm glad it's not the shootout, but 3-on-3 seems a little ridiculous. But I mean, it was exciting, that's for sure. I mean, I was watching the McTavish save, which is just, I mean, he's a Duck player, but you say what you want. That was one of the most incredible plays you're ever going to see. So, but just to kind of get back to the Kings, I thought Simon Tybalt played like Casper Simon Tybalt. I mentioned in the preview that it's like he's a prairie dog around the crease. He just disappears. He's only 5'9". He disappears behind all these big bodies. Then all of a sudden, when the puck is loose, he has it on his stick and he's scoring goals. That's exactly what he did all tournament. And I mean, he's consistent. 6 points in 7 games this World Juniors, and last World Juniors he had 7 points in 7 games. So a really good showing, and let's not forget what Samuel Hellenius did too. I mean, he wasn't that, I guess he didn't really have that much offensive production throughout the tournament, but when the game was big, and in the gold medal game he started coming up big for Finland. I think he screened. He was a big body in front of the net and helped screen one of the goals for Finland. I think it was the first one, and then he started throwing his body around. So it's good to see him play in those big moments and feel comfortable in that, because I'll be curious to see how he does in the full season in Ontario.
Yeah, that's kind of my thing, Russ, is right there with Hellenius and what he's going to do in a full season with Ontario. Saw him get his feet wet last year. I'd love to see eventually when Simon Tybalt starts to play his pro hockey in North America, because I think with both guys, I think they're really, and this is probably can be said for a lot of Kings prospects, is, they look to be solid depth pieces. I don't think either of these guys is, a top 6 player, but you look at Simon Tyvel, maybe he can peak at a third line player that can mix in some PP time. Hellenius maybe can be that bottom 6 and play a PK role. I think that how these guys kind of transition into the pro game over here will be kind of interesting to see. And, we haven't really mentioned Helge Grans yet, but he's another one where, he's coming off a fresh season in Ontario. His second season, I'm hoping that he takes a really big step this year. I'm very high on Helge Grans still. I still think this is potential to be a legit top 4 defenseman in the NHL. So, but it just may be a little bit longer. It may take a couple of years to get there, but I think that's okay. So
yeah, he showed a little bit of those. He showed a little bit of those warts, and Wheeler said that. He said he struggled with the constant pressure from Team USA, missed a wide open shot against Team Germany, didn't look like where he was supposed to be on a 5-on-3. So there was a lot of mental spot there, and like you said, it's a longer game. And I saw in which you think about it, it's like, okay, he's playing against his own age group. He should be dominating. He's playing the AHL, but people have rough stretches. It is what it is. I saw enough of him last season, and I'm not worried in the slightest. But you would have liked to see him have a better game, especially after the strong start, having the assist in game 1.
Yeah, and the one thing, good or bad, whether it's Grans that's maybe a little down or Simon Tyvel that's coming off a big tournament, there's such a microscope that's on this tournament, and you look at it, and it's a 7 games, right? It's the equivalent of a 2-week stretch of a season, so it is difficult. I try not to overreact, good or bad, to what goes on at this tournament. The other thing I'll say is, man, this is totally just kind of not off topic, but when they first canceled the tournament and they then announced that it was going to be played in August, my initial thought was August World Juniors, this is going to be awesome,
right?
And man, I don't know about you guys, but it was just tough. It was tougher for me to get into. Maybe it's just the middle of the summer. There's a lot going on with the kids and the family and stuff. So let's just say I'm looking forward to the one in December a little bit more.
Well, yeah, and then you only have 3 Kings prospects compared to like 8 or 9 that are usually in there. But yeah, and then also the empty stadiums. But yeah, it was hard, I guess, to watch some of these games, because the thing that makes the World Juniors so exciting is you have these huge crowds of all these countries representing their teams, and it's just so fun to watch, to see all the fans get behind these young kids. I mean, they're 18, 19, 20 years old, so it's always exciting. But I don't know, this one just had like a little bit more of a damper to it. I don't know, maybe if the Kings had more prospects in there, we'd probably be more excited. Leaving Brant Clark off Team Canada and no Martin Chromiak, that had a little bit, that was a little bit more disappointing. But I mean, all in all, I think it was a good tournament. But to go back to Grans, it's going to be good to see what he can do with the Reign this year. That defense is so stacked. I mean, you consider who they have. I mean, Spence is most likely going to be down there to start the year. Bjornfoot might be down there to start the year, and then you have Noisiainen finally over here in North America to play in the AHL for this first season. So it's going to be a fun team to watch. I mean, I talked about how stacked the Ontario Reign were last year. Man, they're going to be even that much better this year.
And a little teaser for those that are watching live on this is Wednesday night. On Thursday, there will be Ryan Sykes for Hockey Royalty has a top 20 prospects list coming out. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I'm hoping Simon Tyvel comes to the rookie face-off in a couple weeks. I've yet to see him play live, and I'm really curious to see how he fares around that competition.
Yeah, getting on to the next thing here in our topic, Swamp Beach. So my favorite ECHL team,
so pumped, Brandon. You got to be
is coming into the fold, baby. Bringing them in permanently. Get your Swamp Rabbits gear. I like to see the Swamp Rabbits gear in reverse retro, purple and gold. Let's get all these jerseys going. I just love it. I mean, they had so many players in and out of that lineup, bringing them in, and I think it's still one of the best names in minor league hockey for the Swamp Rabbits there. I think it'll be good having an official affiliation, being able to send, there's going to be more and more prospects coming along, right? Francisco Pinelli is going to be coming soon, Chromiak, all these guys, yada, yada, yada. They're going to need, places to play, and I think it's going to be good for them, and I think that's more of a news than anything else. If anybody has any highlights, if not, then we'll go straight into the signings here. So straight signings for the LA Kings. We'll start with Alan Quine, if that's how you pronounce his last name. Born February 25th, 1993. A crisp 29 years old, veteran, going to be playing for the Ontario Reign. Originally drafted in the 3rd round, 85th overall by the Red Wings, went back into the draft, and then went to the 6th round by the Islanders. Played over 100 games in the NHL, but last season played 39 for the Silver Knights with 28 points. I'll start with the resident Reign expert here, Joe. Do you have any tidbits here on his game after seeing him play for the Knights quite a bit last season?
I just think what it is we've talked about this. This is a really, really young Reign team, right? Like they're not only they're high prospects and all that, but they're very, very young, especially when you do lose the likes of of Sutter. So I think this is part of them just, and they lost Ferk as well. I think this is just something to get them a little bit more, kind of an AHL veteran in the fold, in the mix. But I think it's not somebody that if they needed to spot in and out of the lineup, you were never taking Ferk out and you were never taking Sutter out of the lineup, where maybe this is a veteran that, if they want to get somebody else a look, they can do that. So I think this is much more just a solid veteran signing for the Ontario Reign and to kind of help bring along some of these young prospects.
Yeah, I think Kings management is probably so disappointed that they had to bow out so early, and it was just unfortunate because of all the injuries that happened at the NHL level. You had all these players that were playing really well for the Reign had to step up and play on the Kings team. So, I mean, when you lose players like Jordan Spence, who was probably one of the best defensemen in terms of offensive production in the AHL as a rookie, and then you lose Sean Dursey and all that, but yeah, to bring in these veteran players, especially when you have to replace players like Brett Sutter, who is a real big vocal leader in the room, and then also Martin Ferk, who's also a big leader in the room. You have to bring in these veteran players to kind of replace them and then help out these young players. Because like you mentioned, Joe, it is going to be a young team, and they're going to be expected to make a playoff run because that playoff experience is really vital for some of these young players' development. So hopefully they can make a longer run in the Calder Cup, and you can get a little bit more consistency with players, and you don't have that much more injuries at the NHL level, so they can develop and get a little bit more chemistry because you want to see them playing and contending for that Calder Cup.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say is Sutter was very quick to drop the gloves, and if he needed to, he wasn't out there to fight, but he was a veteran guy that wasn't going to take any crap and was quick to jump in. And I don't know that I see that with Queen. So we'll see. I guess he's a little bit more of an offensive player, I'd say, than Sutter is. So just throwing that out there.
The other signing here comes in, and Sebastian's hinting at it here in the chat live on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Did Parikh sign with Colorado? Yes, he did sign with Colorado. The Eagles, the AHL affiliate. And we've been talking about this nonstop. Where are all these goalies going to play, right? The signing of Phoenix Copley, where are all these goalies going to play? We had 4 or 5 goalies outside of Villalta last season. Parikh got a couple starts, and now he's going to get a chance to play on a really good Colorado team from last season. I don't know where he stems in the pipeline as far as how many starts he's going to get, but it seems like he's going to get a lot more starts than what he would have gotten if he stayed in Ontario and at a higher level than what it would be in the ECHL or in the USHL.
Maybe. I know that Justus Annunen played pretty well in playoffs for Colorado when he was in there. I think it was he showed up in that first round against the Reign. It was pretty good. So we'll see where he does slot in, and if he's somebody that will see a ton of time. That said, that's for a team that we've beaten to death. I think the goaltending or lack thereof, talent, whatever, in the Kings organization. But the one thing they had was, you could say, they had depth. They had a lot of bodies, and Parikh was one of my top 2 or 3 among those bodies. So it's tough to see him go. But that said, if they don't have a spot for him to play, it's kind of tough to keep him around. So, and that's what's always been difficult about bringing in kind of another prospect goalie is, where are these guys all going to play? So I don't know. I don't know if this opens up an opportunity to to keep their eye out and look to see if there is somewhere to strike, whether it's another college signing or a trade or something like that. I'm not sure, but I mean, you could look at it from the rest of the crop, the Herenics, the Volultas and Inghams, like, hey, it's one less guy to kind of beat out, I suppose you could say.
Well, it's not going to be one less guy because Kings still own his rights. He just was signed to an AHL only contract, and so the Kings can still sign him. The Kings can still sign him if he has a good season, and so you get him the highest level of playing time. I think when you're talking about all these bodies, he outside of Villalta has the highest draft capital, and teams are not often willing to move across from that without giving them a full shot. He was the 87th pick overall in the 2019 draft. He's 6'4", 216, only 21 years of age. So I think this is good for him going to Colorado, going to be getting some time, even if it's a backup role, and which would be more high level competition than what he would be getting in maybe the lower levels, and then he'd be getting more games than what he would be getting with the Kings. So I think it's a win-win for everybody there. Richard coming in here. If the Reigns stay healthy, how far will they go in the playoffs? Do you expect to have another monster season? This team is stacked. I mean, obviously the last year, Quinten Byfield starting in there, but not starting, but he rehabbed in there. The year before that, Quinten Byfield there, like the high picks. But Turcotte's still going to be there. Madden's still going to be there. Fagemo likely will start. We mentioned it that we wouldn't be surprised if he hit 40 plus playing in the first spot on the power play as far as goals. Spence should start the season there. And then you're going to get a full season of this monster and Hellenius and a lot of the other prospects, like people that have been clamoring for in Chromiak. I could see them winning the Calder Cup. But what we said last year, Joe and I, this team is going to go as far as the goaltending will take them in the playoffs, because at that point, every team is good in a clutch series. And you could say that at any level of hockey. So it's going to be something interesting to see there. Let's go over to our sponsors here at DraftKings. The action never ends at DraftKings Sportsbook, especially this summer. With tons of ways to bet on all your favorite sports, can you fuel your fandom and feel the heat of the season like never before? Plus, right now, DraftKings Sportsbook is giving customers a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's right, make your first bet up to $1,000. And if it doesn't win, then you get another shot and cash in. You can throw down an all-major action for baseball, golf, MMA, and more, and football starting up. Plus, same-game parlays, spreads, money lines, over-unders, and props. Your betting options feel endless. If they could bet on the rookie tournament, would you bet over or under on 2 goals for Casper Steiner Tybal? I would go over 2. Or you could bet on your Dodgers and Freddie Freeman to maybe win the MVP. It's all available to you at DraftKings. Best of all, DraftKings is safe, secure, reliable. You can deposit and withdraw cash whenever you want. Download DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code THPN and make your first deposit and get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's promo code THPN at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions may apply. See show notes for details. All right, boys, we're getting into the thick of the topics here. We're cruising at 32 minutes. These two might take us another hour to get through. Just kidding, maybe not. Trust in the Kings organization. Athletic put out a poll where the Kings ranked pretty high in their trust in the organization, 5th. Last year, they were 7th. Just to kind of go over it briskly, you look at the public opinion, B pluses or above, fan base Bs or above, all the way down. Very high grades there for everything. Let's start with Russell here. Like, what did you view in this article, and does your feeling of the Kings organization really feel represented in what this poll showed?
Yeah, I think it's a fair representation of what most people kind of feel about management right now. I mean, you kind of look at the rebuild that's been going on that Blake's had to do. He's done really well, and he's drafted well. It seems like he's drafted really well. He's gotten the players that have been really high in some people's scouting rankings, and they're in the system now. He's added pieces like Dano and now Fiala, big pieces that seem to be meshing really well with the chemistry of the team that was made in some of these trades that were brought in from the Maple Leafs, from getting rid of a lot of these players. But I mean, now we're not really at the point of where we're seeing results of some of these players' development. So I think right now, if you look at the stages of the rebuild, the Kings are exactly where they should be. So I think that's why a lot of fans still feel confident in the management, because they've done a pretty good job bringing them out of the rebuild.
Russell hints at one of the lowest grades for fan opinion is under the draft and development, ranking it a B, which is 12th overall. Do you feel that's fair? Do you feel like the Kings are clamoring for that top prospect to break through? Do you feel like the drafting has been suspect? Like, how do you feel that ranking represents what the Kings have done?
I think it's a fair rank. I think it's, when you look at the prospect pool as a whole, it's very deep. You could argue that they've already produced a lot of NHL players and presumably are set to produce a lot more. So I just think when you're able to do that, I think that a B is very fair. That said, when you've had some pretty high picks, they've yet to land a star, right? I mean, we're still waiting on Byfield. We're still waiting on Brandt Clark. It's hard to, I don't want to write Turcotte off from a star standpoint. And I guess, I don't know what a definition, what your definition may be of a star, but like, I still think Turcotte can be a middle six player in the NHL. So productive, perhaps somebody that's a long time NHLer, but maybe not that high end point producer that you would expect out of a 5th overall pick. That's, we've had that conversation, I think. So I think it's fair. I think I look at a couple of the comments that are in that, so Dom Lecision of The Athletic wrote the piece, and I think he had a couple of survey comments. And in general, it kind of alludes to that, right? The fans are confident in where the direction of the team and how things are going, but it's kind of like, where we've all talked about, like, we're just kind of waiting as, okay, where's the next step here in this progression? I think Blake's done a great job in the trades. We're waiting to see one of these prospects turn into a star. And and I think I wrote in the article that when I looked at this piece was, if there's a lot on the right side of the D, right? There's either Spence, there's Helge Grans, that if Brandt Clark doesn't become a star, like, there's still even potential for some of these other guys to become a big time right shot defenseman, right? If Byfield misses, and again, I want to really be clear, like, I'm not expecting that or anything like that. I'm just saying that so far they haven't hit on a star. And if he misses, there's no 1C in LA. I love Phil Deneau. If Phil Deneau's your 1C, you're not winning a cup. So I think that Byfield's got to be that guy that in the next year or two takes some really big steps to replace Andrei Kopitar in a couple of years. That's why he was drafted. So if that happens, the Kings are in great shape, because Deneau's a great 2C. I think he's a perfect 2C on a cup-winning team. I don't know that he's a 1C that has that. I don't think he has enough offense to his game to be that type of center. So there's a lot on Byfield right now.
Yeah, I think you're looking at the disparities here from public opinion versus fan base opinion, and the draft of development is one of them, right? Public opinion gives us a B+, and I think that stems from the ghost of Turcotte Pass, right? Like, and we've talked about it ad nauseum, the Zagreus thing on the cover of NHL. Now you're watching the World Junior Championships, and McTavish is lighting it up, and Brandt Clark ain't even making the roster, and I think fans are just like, okay, can we get one of these guys to poke through and give me some hope? Can we get a Cale Makar? Can we get one of those top guys, or Bowen Byram, who are playing, consistent minutes and at a high NHL level? And then the opposite is fans are super happy, A- with the free agency moves, where public opinion is B+. And I think that maybe East Coast bias, and the fact that they don't get to see Phil Deneau play every single night in this offense. They saw what he was in Montreal, but that wasn't what he was with the Kings, and the impact a lot of these free agents have brought. And I think the reaction to Kevin Fiala, I think, is another not in a downgrade, but a under the table move for the rest of the league, where Kings fans are thrilled about it. I don't know how you feel about that, Russ.
Yeah, Kevin Fiala, it's not really the name that I guess jumps out in terms of like superstar. But I mean, you look at the way he plays. I mean, he's a perfect fit for the Kings. I mean, he's a transitional, fast, neutral zone player who's going to zone entry king. I mean, he's going to fit in with the Kings just well. I mean, but to get back to the development, yeah, that's going to be the biggest, I guess, quote unquote, issue for management if some of these players, like Joe just talked about, if Byfield doesn't pan out or Clark doesn't pan out, especially when you're looking around the league and you see all these players drafted around. I mean, you can even go back to Gabe Vilardi and Rasmus Kupari, who were also high first-round picks. So, yeah, I mean, if you don't see some of these young prospects take that next step and become stars, there could be a little bit more concerns, but there's also some other players that are looking really good. I mean, Jordan Spence was a 4th-round pick, and he looks like he could be one of the best prospects that we didn't even know. And Sean Dursey too. He just was a throwaway almost in a trade. So there's still so many other players that are going to be able to step in. I mean, Martin Kromiak is looking good. Francisco Pinelli looks great. Alex Laferriere. So if these first-round picks, I think I had a fan ask me just a couple weeks ago. It's like, what do you think about all these first-round picks? I'm like, is it concerning with scouting? And I'm like, well, no. If you're just looking at first-round picks, you can probably be concerned. But look at all the other picks. Look at Arthur Kaliyev. He was a 2nd-round pick. Look at, like I just said, Jordan Spence, Mikey Anderson, all these mid-round picks that are starting to pan out and play good minutes in the NHL. So you can't really be concerned.
I think that's a really good point. If anything, I think that speaks to the strength of the scouting, because let's be honest, go back to those first-round picks. Quinten Byfield wasn't a reach.
Everybody was picking him at 2, yeah.
Everybody's picking Turcotte right away where he was slotted. If anything, I think we talked to Scott Wheeler, he had him even higher than that. Mm-hmm. So the key, it's not as if the scouting or the selection of these guys has been the problem. I don't think. I think that's easy. I think that's just too easy to be hindsight. I don't think that's fair, because I think everybody would have picked these guys there. The issue for me is, why are they failing? Mm-hmm. Failing is way too high. I shouldn't say failing. That's not a fair word. Why are they not, perform? And again, Byfield probably will. I'm just, we're playing the what if game here, because we've seen it where Vilardi was an 11th pick, right? That hasn't really come to fruition. Turcotte has had his issues, a lot of it health related, but I think there's serious questions about his potential production too. What happened there? Why was there a miss there? If it happens again with Byfield and or Clark, what keeps happening here? Why does that keep happening? I think it's very fair to ask that question if you're seeing these top 10, top 11 picks just not be that type of player. I mean, talk about Vilardi's hardly been an NHL player as an 11th overall pick so far. And I love the guy. I think he's extremely talented, but for whatever reason, it hasn't worked. So, and I've always been the one, and Rando, you get on me sometimes because I'm a little bit too much on the patient side of things, but I think it is at least fair to kind of have the development question come in. If these guys continue to not hit, that becomes a problem after a while. It has to. But to the scouting, they're doing, so far, it seems to be a great job with their, late 1st and 2nd, 3rd, 4th round picks. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you look at it in any sport, not only hockey, football or whatever, the first-round picks are the ones that are supposed to change your franchise, right? Those are the guys that could be generational players for your team. I've mentioned it multiple times. Average games played for a top 5 pick is 860 games. That is a lot. That's a decade worth of production for a player, and that's not fair to throw that on Turcotte and Byfield in this earlier in their career. But the stats are what the stats are. That's over a decade long of data that we have, or that I looked up, and it just is what it is, right? That's what those players are represented when they're drafted at that spot, right? And then when you get guys like, a George Kill for my Niners in the 5th, who's an all-pro tight end, that's a positive that you didn't expect, where missing on a first-round pick is an expectation that pick is going to be good, and it didn't come through. And obviously there's bust everywhere, but those busts hit worse than, hey, if the 5th-round pick that we drafted this year doesn't make it, no Kings fan is going to lose sleep over that. But they are going to lose sleep if Byfield fails or Clark fails or Turcotte doesn't see the ice, regardless if that's his fault or not. It just is what it is. There's so much more expectation when it comes being a top 10 pick, because those guys are supposed to change your franchise. Turcotte's supposed to play 800 something games. Byfield's supposed to be given a silver stick. That's what you expect with a pick that high, whether that's fair on these kids or not. It's just it comes with the territory of pro sports.
Well, and if one team busts over and over and over again, that it becomes a problem. I mean, Vilardi, again, we just talked about it. Vilardi, Turcotte for various reasons, but so far And, and I think part of the issue that maybe this conversation is coming up, and we talked about this last time with Clark again being skipped over for World Juniors, and now we're like, what the heck's going on here? I thought this kid was a stud. So these questions start to creep in. All this said, I'm been very high in Vilardi's talent. I don't know where the fit is right now with the Kings, to be determined. And I know we're going to touch on some of this in a bit. Turcotte, I still think, can be a middle six player in the NHL. He's got to stay healthy. Verdict still out on Byfield and Clark, and I'm still extremely optimistic about those two. So,
anything to add there, Russ, before we bring it into your poll here?
No, yeah, that you made a good point, because you look at top two. I mean, the thing with the first round picks, I mean, everybody has pretty much the same rankings for the top 15 players in the NHL. So it's not really much of a surprise if, I mean, yeah, you can reach for a player, but I mean, it's not everything kind of seems to go according to plan pretty much. So to take Byfield,
there's still choices.
No,
right?
absolutely.
Like they could have took Stützle. Like if Stützle is a 1,000-game player and Byfield doesn't play over 500 games, then you failed at that pick. Like that's just.
Yeah, and there's also more of a risk if you reach and then it doesn't fail, in terms of if you don't reach and then the player fails. I mean, then I think it's just more on development. But the thing I go back to is everybody had Byfield at 2. Everybody had Brandt Clark in the top 10. Everybody had Alex Turcotte in the top 5. But like you talked about, Randon, nobody talks about those 5th round picks like Martin Chromiak if they hit, or Samuel Fagemo, who nobody took in his draft year, and then all of a sudden gets drafted in the 2nd round when the Kings. So, I mean, those are things that fans need to look at more, and not just be so much of a microscope on the first round picks. Look at all the other picks that are panning out. Arthur Kaliev could be a 30-goal scorer, and I think he might be a 30-goal scorer. That would be my hot take for this year. So, and he was drafted in the 2nd round. So, yeah, there's a lot more you got to look at, and you just can't really focus on the first rounders.
I think when you come into that, it was an article written a couple years ago about draft and development around the league and how many of these draft picks play so many games and what high-level games they play. And Kings were in the top 5 in most those categories, draft and development, and getting games played at the NHL level from a lot of their back-end draft picks. I think they had the most games played by 7th-round players. So, they're hitting on a lot of these guys that can play gritty games. You're talking about the Matt Roys of the world. And being able to hit on those, those are quality games that are being played. But Matt Roy ain't winning you a Stanley Cup. It's Nathan McKinnon. It's Cale Makar. It's these guys that are hitting in the 1st round, in the 2nd round, that are carrying teams to cups. It's just really what it is. And fans deservedly so. Like, I'm not going to shy away saying that I'm happy with the way Toby Bjornfoot's playing. Like, it scares me the fact that it's another 1st-round pick that's degressing in what we thought that he could play. Right.
They traded up for him too.
Yeah. So it's just those kind of things. And I think fans have a right to be a little bit upset, but then Joe's things like, okay, yeah, they still are young, and Kempe needed to be 25 before he really came into his own and became an NHL player.
Well, so, Byfield, we can't wait. Byfield can't be 25.
No.
Sooner.
but Kupari could be 25 before he really hits it. Like, right. Those types of guys. So it's just something to think about. So, coming in here to this poll, looking at it right now, around 1,700 votes, and a pretty even percentage here. Who has the most approved next season? And it was between Gabe Vilardi, Quinten Byfield, Cal Pederson, and Alex Turcotte. And I think we'll start here with the bottom, just because I think it'll be the least amount of time that we talk about this player. And it was Alex Turcotte with 13%. With the least amount of votes of stuff to prove. And I think that's spot on. I mean, what he has to prove that he can stay healthy. Like, that's pretty much it. I mean, I think he has the least amount of expectation or expectation for the season. I don't know if I was trying to come up with another adjective there, but coming into this year, like, it's just stay on the ice, which is pretty low pressure at that point compared to the other 3 guys. My expectation is also at an AHL level. Like, if he's healthy, I want to see him dominate, and that would be my expectation. What about you guys?
Same. I want to see him play a full healthy season in Ontario. There's just no reason. Just because everybody else from that draft class is up and playing games doesn't mean Turcotte has. Everybody's different, and he's battled just injury after injury, and then the concussion in playoffs. Like, it sucks. Like, yes, it's fair to question, can he be a productive player in the NHL? But I just want to see him play. There's no point in rushing him. It makes no sense. The Kings, barring some drastic injuries like they had last season, there's no room in the lineup. There's no need to force feed it. Let him play a healthy season. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think he needs to prove that he can physically play pro hockey, right? That is something that you do have to prove. But in the grand scheme, like, I don't think it'd be fair or realistic to say you need to prove that you can go play 80 games and, oh, by the way, you better get 70 plus points doing it. I just want to see him play healthy, and then as the season goes along, similar like Akil Thomas last year, Rando, where that first, when he did come back from his injuries, the first 20 games was kind of rough, but boy, did he have a great stretch to end the season. Like, that's what we'd like to see for Turcotte. Hopefully he starts right off the hop, good stretch, just stay on the ice, and then as the season gets going, maybe he has a big second half of the season production wise.
I think everybody's talking about with injury, with hopefully healthy. Like, I'm tired of that BS. Russ, give me something spicy. Like, what is your expectation? Health is there. We'll put that ground level. Health is there. What is your expectation for Turcotte this season?
I think he needs to play it maybe 15, 20 games this year in the NHL. And I mean, it's all dependent on injuries and whether that. I mean, you look at most seasons, you have to use obviously like 20 plus guys. So just in the forwards position. So there's going to be a spot for him to play some games. And I would expect him to probably be the first center called up. Let's say if Blake Lizotte just happens to go down with injury or whatever, I would say maybe he's the first center that gets called up. I mean, you still have Kupari. Looks like he's going to be transitioning to the wing position. I don't know what's going to happen with Jared Anderson-Dolan. But the thing with Turcotte, when I put this poll together, you kind of look at all four of these players. They all have really something to prove in their own way. But I'm glad that Turcotte was last on this poll because he doesn't really have anything to prove. He just, like Joe said, he just needs to stay healthy. I mean, there's no control. He has no control over what other players are doing that get drafted around him. It's just, it sucks because like that injury that he had is just it was unfortunate. Really, it was just bad luck, really, to get hit and just blindsided like that and have a concussion. That's just, there's no fault on his own. That's not really an ACL tear or something random that just happens. That's just a blindside hit that comes out of nowhere, and now all of a sudden you have a concussion, and you just hope that he can stay healthy. That's really all he needs to prove, is that he can stay healthy. And I guess he doesn't really need to prove it. He just needs to stay healthy and just be a good player in the AHL. I think he can be one of the top producers on the Reign this year, and hopefully play a few games and score some points with the Kings this year too. Maybe he ends up being on the playoff roster when it comes to the end, because I mean, that's the type of player Turcotte is. He plays in these big moments, in these big games. So if he can stay healthy, I'm sure we'll see him flourish in that position.
And for assuming health, like I said, my expectation for him to prove it is he's a point per game player in the AHL. Drafted in the top 5, like I want to see for sure if his scoring ability is still there. Like I'm assuming health, like I said.
Sure.
With that team and how many scorers, like you're assuming either Chromiak's going to be on his wing or Fagimo's going to be on his wing, or Fagimo, and those are some high-end scorers, and he should be able to get quite a few points from the assist factor, and then maybe Akil Thomas on the other side or a Madden. Like he should be able to put up some points, and like I said, assuming health, my expectation is point per game in the AHL. Like I want to see him produce at least he showed in a 6-game stretch last year that he could do it. Can he do it if he's healthy all season? I think he can, but that's my expectation for him to be a point per game player. Anything that Russ was saying about him coming up and playing multiple games, I think is very astute. And I really didn't even think about that. So that's something to think about. How many games will he actually get slotted in? But if he is a point per game player, like I'm expecting, he's going to be one of the first guys brought up, and he'll get that opportunity, which I think will be good. Did any of you guys have Turcotte as your vote?
I didn't. No.
Okay.
And just to kind of go back to his stats just real quick. I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at what he played, 27 games last year, he had 20 points in 27 games, and he was a plus 16. So it's not like to say he was a bad player when he was healthy. So stay healthy, and we'll see him be a really good player for the Reign.
Next one was a close second and third with a 20.9% and 24.3%. But coming in third place was Cal Pederson, and this was my vote. So I guess I'll start it off here. I think he has the most proved because money says so. And the payment of his contract dictates expectations. And I think in a lot of ways, just like draft capital does. But this is a guy that you paid to be your future goalie. You paid to be there and take the reins. You paid him to be, play 50 plus games. And I think he has the most to prove. I think that taking a down step last season and quote unquote having Quick bail you out, or bail the Kings out, I think he has the most to prove. I mean, anybody want to jump in here and argue with me on this?
How is Twitter up in arms about the goaltending, and he finishes third in this poll so far?
There we go.
Come
on, Joe. You've been goaltending battling all off season.
What are we doing here? He is my pick as well. Of course, he has the most to prove. This is a huge year for Cal Pederson, right? I mean, he has got to start to take this season over, and yes, the contract is a big piece of it. Otherwise, you've got a goalie that's making $5 million a year for the next 3 seasons. That isn't doing a whole lot, and that becomes a problem. So yes, this is a very big season for Cal, and I think he does have the most to prove. I think Russ kind of said that each of these has kind of their own to prove, or a lot to prove in their own way. But this is a big year for Cal, and the one thing I'll say is, unlike somebody else that we'll get to on this list, it's not as if I don't think if he does have a down year that like his time in the organization is done, because they signed him to this contract, so he's here. So like, I guess in that sense, like he's still going to be the organization, but this is a big year for Cal, and I think to try to start to take the reins, yeah, he's got the most to prove. I'm shocked that he's not running away with this, frankly.
Yeah, I'm actually very surprised that he came in third too. He's not my pick, but he was close. He'd be close second to my pick. So I mean, the thing with Cal is, yeah, they gave him that contract, and you look at other goalies around the NHL. I just brought up the list. Ville Husso is making $4.75 million with Detroit. He just signed that new deal. Jack Campbell just got it was a 5x5 deal, so he's making $5 million a year. Linus Ullmark. I mean, there's some other goalies around that kind of age range that Cal's at that's also got $5 million that seem a little bit better. I think Igor Shesterkin's even making $5 million a year, and he just won the Vezina. So, but the thing with Cal is that I don't know if they really necessarily see him as the future. I mean, we talk about him being the future of the goal of the franchise for the Kings in net. I mean, it's only 3 years, so it's not like they signed him to some 6+ year deal. So if, let's say, he doesn't pan out, you only really have him for 2 more years after the season at $5 million. Yeah, it would be disappointing, obviously. But in terms of proving, I really don't think that he really necessarily needs to prove that he needs to be the franchise goalie for the Kings. He just needs to be a decent goalie for the Kings, an above average, I guess, goalie for the Kings.
Maybe not franchise in a term like he needs to be the goalie for the next decade, but he needs to prove that he's the number one goalie for the duration of this contract.
He proved he was a starting caliber goalie last season.
And right, and I guess for Cal, like he signed his deal, right? So he's made his money, which is good for him, full marks. But the deal takes him to what, he's 31. I would hope that he wants to prove that he's a starting goalie in the NHL, right? So that this isn't his last contract or last decent contract. So I think he's got, a lot to prove. Yeah, I think he does. Now, but I do agree, and we alluded to this last time we spoke, Russ. I think I think we should be careful because we were spoiled about we had Quick for so long in Los Angeles, and he's still there, and that the next guy, you don't have to look at this as saying he's got to be the next guy for the decade, right? Not necessarily. I think it's fair to look at this over the term of his contract, but we're at the point now where now is kind of the time where you really got to start to see him show that he can play as the number one goaltender for the next 3 seasons in Los Angeles, because you just don't know how much Jonathan Quick's going to have left in the tank during that time.
We didn't pay him to be a Vezina winner. We paid him to be a starting caliber goalie, and he wasn't. And so that's my biggest thing. He has a lot to prove because we expect him. And on the last podcast, I think we all wanted him to play over 50 games, if not over 55 games, would be what we expect from Cal as a number one goalie for this organization. And he wasn't even close to that level of output last season. I think that's where the biggest thing comes for me is he has the most to prove, because he also, not only does he have the most to prove, he has the most effect on how many points this team gets next season out of any of these 4 guys, right? So it's just, I think that's where it's at. Also in the chat, if you guys have some questions, we can maybe get to it at the end. Just please throw them in there. We'll try our best. The next one, barely over that amount, there is Gabriel Vilardi at 24.9%. I think here it becomes the draft capital expectations, right? So drafted first round, high pick. What we're feeling all about Turcotte, like we said, like draft capital dictates expectations, and he hasn't really lived up to it. Showing flashes, but people want more. People want that pizzazz. People want steady play. And I think from him, his time to prove it is for his own career. Like this is his time to prove it, to be a forward in LA and not another organization.
Yes, and real quick before I jump in, I love Vegas. They're the best. Phil Kessel's going to Vegas. They don't want salary cap, Russ. Who cares about a salary cap? Anyways, Gabe Vilardi, he was a close second for me behind. Well, not that close. He was second for me, but there you go. The thing for me with Gabe, the reason he has so much to prove and was second on my list was because I think his clock is really ticking with the organization. And you just kind of talked about it there, Russ, or Rando, that like, I think he's an extremely talented player. I think his move to the wing in Ontario was big. For whatever reason, I don't see that there's this, and I'm not there. So this is total speculation. And if I'm wrong, wouldn't be the first time, but it just seems like there just isn't this, it's not clicking right now with Gabe and the LA Kings. There's something not there. I don't know if there's any issues, or again, total speculation. I don't want to throw that out there. It's just something's not clicking here, and I don't think he's long for the organization, barring some sort of big step here. So I as much as I like him, I think this is it. It's do or die in terms of where he is in the organization for Gabe Vilardi.
Yeah, Gabe Vilardi was actually my pick, and a lot of it was the reason, like you mentioned, Randon, it almost feels like this is make or break season for Gabe Vilardi. Not even only just with the Kings, but in the NHL. It's hard to be so hard on Vilardi, because I can't think of a prospect that's gone through more of a roller coaster start to his career than Gabe Vilardi. I mean, drafted was 11th overall, has these back problems that pretty much lose him a year and a half of development. Then all of a sudden he gets healthy. He looks great in Ontario. He has those games up with the Kings where he's pretty much living high. The season gets shut down from COVID. And so it pretty much just stops everything, all the momentum he had. And then all of a sudden you come back next year, everybody's still got that excitement brewing for Vilardi. He starts as the 2C and then just struggles. And then comes back to last season, opens the preseason on fire with Anderson and Kachev. And then all of a sudden the wheels fall off and he gets sent back down to the Reign. But the thing is, with Vilardi, he looked really good with the Reign. And now he's coming into another year with the Kings, where I think this is really the last year, maybe the final year with LA, where this is going to be the time to prove that he's an NHL player. If he can just be consistent and then show a little bit of improvement in the defensive zone, I think he still can. But I mean, the reason I picked him is because this is it for Vilardi. It feels like with Cal Pederson, he's still got 2 more years left on his deal after this year. He doesn't really have to prove anything. He does have to prove that he's worth the deal, but he's already signed as an NHL player, and he doesn't have to really worry about that. With Vilardi, man, this is it. It feels like, and I feel wrong with saying that, because he's still only 23. You look at with Adrian Kempe, how long he took, but with Kempe, he was still playing full time in the NHL all that year, and then all of a sudden he's breaking out to a 35 goal scorer. Will Vilardi end up being that 35 plus or 30 plus goal scorer in the NHL? I mean, I still think there's a chance to be. He has I don't know of many players in the system that has the puck handling ability or the offensive capabilities as Gabe Vilardi does. So it's just hard, because this year you want to see more, you're expecting to see more, but this is it right here for him. He's only got 1 year. They only signed him to 1 year, and then he's an RFA. So we'll see what happens after that.
Nav W21 Phil says, I feel the same way, Russ. It's now or never. And he comes in. Gabe was my pick Injuries hurt him in the past. Now he needs to show he's healthy, can score consistently.
But where's he going to play?
On the ice?
Yeah.
He just edged out Cal for me.
He-
on the ice, he says there, Joe. On the ice.
That's great. I would love to see him on a line with Byfield and Kaliev. I think it'd be awesome in the third line, but it's not going to happen. Alex Iafallo is going to play there, right? Is he the 13th forward? So what's his opportunity right now? Because is he going to play? I mean, maybe he plays over Grundstrom or over Lemieux alongside Lazat, I guess. But are we really going to see true Gabe Vilardi and give him a fair shot? I don't know. I'm not. Fair is the wrong word, but are we going to see what he can do in that role? Like, no, I don't think we will. So if it just feels like to me he's stuck in this, 13th forward role, kind of in between. There's no spot for him. He's not going to get the opportunity to. I hope he does. I hope I'm wrong here, but where's he playing?
He gets the opportunity in the same way Turcotte gets the opportunity, and he has to take advantage of it. And as far as I'm concerned, he's gonna have every opportunity in camp to make this roster. And then if there's injury, he better do well with the time that he gets on the ice to make Todd McClellan say, I can't put this guy back down. Rob Blake, trade away. We have too many forwards. We need to make room for this guy full time. Like, that's going to be his job, and that's part of being an athlete. Like, is taking advantage of opportunities that are given to you by other people's misfortune. It's just part of sports. And I think the fact that he's going to have to do that. I mean, unless he earns it out of camp, he's going to have to come in there from an injury standpoint.
I could see him platooning a little bit with Lemieux. I don't see Lemieux's probably not going to play 60-plus games with the Kings this year, so you can probably see a little bit more of a carousel, I guess, out of that last spot. Because, I mean, Joe, like you said, it's the top 9 are pretty much set, and barring we get some surprising trade that happens where something happens, or even Victor Arvidsson, let's say Victor Arvidsson's not healthy to start the year because of his surgery. But, I mean, the top 9 positions are set. You have no room there. So you're really only looking at the wing positions on the fourth line, whether it's Grundstrom or Lemieux, and then you slot in either Kupari or Vilardi on one of those. But I would like to see
that could be an interesting discussion for maybe a future pod. What if Victor Arvidsson doesn't ready out of camp?
Yeah.
Like, who plays up on that line? What does the third line look like at that point? Like, where do you see? Is it going to be all defensive-minded players? And I follow on the second line. Do they add a scorer up there? Is it Kaliev? Do they give Vilardi the shot? I think that could be an interesting discussion for a future pod.
Yeah, we'll see what happens when training camp starts. Obviously, we'll see if Arvidsson's even on the ice or not. But I know with the timetable that they had given, it was pretty much leading right up into October. So, I mean, with Vilardi, I just hope he gets the shot, though. He deserves the playing time, I think.
So
and
talented.
he's put in the work. So this is his first. Well, I mean, last year he came in a lot healthier, but he even mentioned himself that his defensive game needed improvement, and he went down to Ontario. Seemed like he improved it quite a bit.
Changed positions.
Yeah, and changed position, became a winger. I mean, there's a lot of transition that's been happening in his game, and a lot of learning and developing that's still been going on just in the last few years. Because I mean, he's almost a year and a half behind some of these teams or some of these players around his age. So I'm just hoping that he comes into camp healthy and he gets a shot. Because who knows? Maybe he has another impressive preseason where he's kind of just pushing at the door and just kind of nudging McClellan a little bit, saying, "Hey, I've put in the work, I've put in my time, and I'm ready to take that role." So this is going to be a big year for him. I'm expecting a good season.
Yeah, number 1 on the list here, number 2 overall pick, getting 36.9% of the vote is Quinten Byfield. And I think I've talked about it multiple times. It's either opportunity or draft cost, or it's money. And the draft cost is definitely high with Quinten Byfield. I think you're looking at this is his time to prove that he is 3C. He was injured and, he only played his best game against Austria in the World Juniors. I think a lot of people are voting this way because they are tired of our prospects not dominating. They're tired. Yeah. They want their number 2 overall pick to score 40+ points, me included. I would be, that's what my expectation is of him. I think I've saw a lot of people on Twitter saying it's 50 points over or bust for Quinten Byfield this season. I'm not going to go that far, but my expectation is 40 for him. And I think as a third C, with the amount of scoring help that he'll probably get with Kaliev like that is reasonable in my opinion for a player of his caliber. And I think that's where the vote is coming from, where a lot of fans want to see this. And he was farther down because I don't think the pressure is on him necessarily to make it this season as it is for his entire career, but it's definitely there from fans, and the percentage shows that.
Yeah, I think if each player has their own, they have to prove to the fans or prove to the team in their own unique way. Like we just talked about, Turcotte has to prove he can stay healthy and be a full-time player in the NHL. I guess it's not really something he has to prove, just needs to stay healthy. Pederson has to prove that he's worth the money. Gabe Vilardi just has to prove he can be an NHL player and be that consistent quality NHL player in the NHL. But with Byfield, I guess it's just he has to prove he's worth that second overall pick is what most people are saying. But the thing with the reason I didn't pick him, I understand a lot of reasons why people did. And I read everybody's comments. Kings fans are great in terms of their own reasoning for picking the players they did. I thought it was excellent, the reasons they were giving. But with Byfield, yeah, I understand why people want to see that. They just want to see progression. So they want to see him be that 30, 40-point scorer. But he's also only 20 years old. He just turned 20. So let's say he doesn't become he doesn't score 40 points this season. It's not like to say that the Kings are going to give up on him or anything like that. He's still really young. So for this season now coming up, I don't think there's necessarily a reason to say that he has to prove to management or to fans that he can be a top two or an NHL player drafted in the top two. But eventually he will. Eventually.
Yeah, I think that's why he was third for me. As I just said a little while ago, like he can't miss. Like he has to be the heir apparent to Kopitar within the next few years, but it doesn't have to be this year. But I think you're right that the voting here is the frustration of not hitting on that star yet, and also I think that there's a recognition that he does need to turn into that player. And so we at least need to see some sort of progression. Like, okay, he's really taking steps toward he's on the verge here of becoming that top two centerman over the next few years here. So I think that's what people are looking for. And my stance hasn't changed. I think he's knock on wood here, he goes into the season healthy. I think he's going to get a fresh run of games at the start. And I think come holiday time, he's going to be I think you're going to see a big turn of the corner. I think he's going to have a big second half of the season, if not sooner. I think this could be a solid year for Quinten Byfield.
Yeah, I think he's going to start off really well because, the best time to start playing or give some young players minutes is in October and November when games aren't necessarily more important when you get to February, March. So give him at least 15 minutes a night and see what he can do. I just want to see some chemistry develop between he and Kaliev. Just those two players are going to be the building blocks of the franchise for this team going forward. And if you can develop some chemistry between them, that would be huge for the future of the Kings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this comes from here. I think Richard hits maybe on the head here. Byfield was only number one because of the Zagros effect, LOL. And I think that's where it comes in. Like if Toby Bjornfoot played like Moritz Seider did last season, would we how much better would we feel about the Kings? If Quinten Byfield played anywhere to the level of I guess another Detroit Red Wing there in scoring that many points and like being at the top of the Calder voting, like how much more would we be excited about this upcoming season, not including the Kevin Fialas? For me it would be, I think if Byfield put up 40 last season, like you'd be hearing a lot of clamoring amongst Kings fans for, hey, we're a Stanley Cup contender because we got Fiala and Byfield put up 40 last season. He's going to put up 60 this season. Like I think a lot of that kind of stuff where none of these players outside of Kaliev have really hit on a consistent basis. And even Kaliev was on the fourth line. Like I think the expectations are there from that standpoint. And so that's where I think it really hits there. And it's not fair for him as far as, like I said, I don't think it really, there's not the most pressure on him this season to prove it, but people want to see that the second overall pick was worth it.
Yeah,
as a Kings fan,
I think I go back to something that in one of our conversations with Scott Wheeler of the Athletic Rando, where there was a stretch of drafts here where we talked about where there just hasn't been that impact player. Like you look at since really there was the McDavid draft, and then you've seen some. I mean, because if you ask the Ranger fans right now, like I don't know how comfortable they are with Lafreniere and Capo Caco. Like they started to come on a bit last season, but like so it's not to say the Kings are the only team that are kind of missing on these big picks, and so you just wonder if maybe it was just a tough. The draft years just weren't that good when it came to elite high end talent. Perhaps that's something that again maybe that's hindsight, right? That we're kind of looking back at it. But I just something that's worth kind of kicking around and thinking about. But yeah, no, I agree. I think that Byfield, he should get a bigger opportunity too, right? More minutes, bigger or better wingers in terms of who he's playing with in the lineup, and hopefully some power play time too.
I just think that injury last season couldn't have come at a worse time. That's the biggest thing is because it's Byfield. Great. Yeah, exactly. He was the best player on the ice in the game where he broke his ankle. The best player. Yep. I mean, and there were some other good quality NHL players playing in that preseason game. So to lose all that time and all that start, like I just talked about, when you're playing these games in October, November, games that he missed, and all of a sudden he's jumping into a team that's in the middle of this big playoff push. So he's playing really important minutes in really important games, especially with all the injuries that the Kings were going through at that time. So to kind of thrust him into that situation and still perform pretty good. I mean, he was only 19 years old playing in these minutes, and he got some playoff experience too. So yeah, I mean, you come into a preseason now where he looked really good at development camp. We'll see if they want him to play on the rookie faceoff, see if he fares there. I think he should play, because I think that would be a good kind of confidence builder for him to play against players around his age. Because I think he was eligible for this last World Juniors, if I'm not mistaken, too, since it was postponed. So, yeah. I mean, the fact that he didn't play in that, so hopefully the Kings fans can see Quinten Byfield be that talented player that he is, because he looks really good in development camp, and I think there's going to be a good start to the season for him too.
Yeah, I think it's going to be something here. Let's get to a couple fan questions here, and then we'll round it out for the day. Sebastian Hensley comes in here and says, at what point does LA trade for another goalie? This is when we were talking about Cal. I don't think that's anytime soon. I think it'll be maybe an off-season move if Quick decides to move on, if he signed for cheaper. But I don't see any trade for a goalie mid-season unless we're talking season-ending injury. What do you guys think?
Agree with that. The only thing I'll say is the Kings have been a team that have dabbled in that, in the college market. They've taken advantage. Like that's how they got Cal Pederson with that trade with Buffalo, where he did not the trade with Buffalo. He not signed, and then he signed with the Kings, I believe, is what that situation was. But there may be some guys that are not, coming back or signing with their team that are still in college. So there's perhaps opportunity there. But yeah, from a big goalie trade or anything like that, I don't see that.
Nadius Maximus comes in here, and I think this is his first comment, so thank you for listening and joining in the chat. Are the Kings looking to trade for a defenseman? I'm wondering if there's any delay in signing Anderson and Dursey. I think this has been on a lot of people's minds. I think we've all said online that as long as they're signed by camp, I'm still not worried. Are you guys in the same boat on that one?
The thing that I'm become a little bit more worried about, I mean, not necessarily worried, but kind of raised my eyebrows a little bit, was Noah Dobson's contract in New York. The fact that he's got 3 years at $4 million, and it's right around the same age as Mikey. I think he's got a little bit more experience than him, but and he's more of an offensive type player. Mm-hmm. That was a little eyebrow raising. But I mean, the Kings I think have like 4.5 mil left to sign these two players, and I'm starting to get away from my expectation of them hovering around 2 to 2.5 mil. So I think those trade wins may start popping up as we get closer to training camp. I wouldn't be surprised.
We talked about, one of the things was Mikey Anderson. He's a number one lefty for the Kings. Whether or not he's a number one lefty NHL wise, I don't know, but he is for the Kings. So perhaps that's what he's going off of. And yeah, I think Noah Dobson's a little different. Dobson plays the power play. He's a little bit more of an offensive player. Those guys are going to tend to make a little bit more money. So, I think we kind of penciled Anderson in though. I feel like we kind of ballparked him being around $3 million. Now, maybe that was over a longer term deal if they ended up signing him to like a long term thing over the summer. But I'm not surprised if his deal comes in around 3. But I guess I have no idea where the two sides are. I think Jersey maybe is a little bit more surprising just because there isn't that run of years of I've been a number 1D, a top pair D for you guys for the Kings. So that I don't know. Maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something being talked about behind the scenes. I guess we'll find out. But I'll be honest. Like I haven't lost 1 second of sleep over it. I'm not at all worried. Not yet.
Yeah. I mean, I think they find a way to fit them in, whether that is because they have to trade away a contract.
Mm-hmm.
I think how everyone's pointing to Iafallo being the name. I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't see that happening, but it's just you look at the salaries that are being handed out, and with the Kings have to sign Mikey Anderson, who looked pretty good in the playoffs, and Alan Walsh is Sean Durzee's agent, and you know how much he fights for his players. It's the same player agent as Marc-Andre Fleury with that whole situation in Vegas. I mean, he loves to fight for his players, getting some good money and some good terms. So I don't know. It's just I don't see either one being traded, but I can see a reason to move some forwards out to make room cap space wise and to make room for some of these younger players that I'm starting to get on that boat a little bit.
I mean, you mentioned Iafallo. It's probably tougher now, a little tougher now. He's $4 million playing on the next to Anze Kopitar, or $4 million playing on the third line. I mean, that's a little bit of a different situation. And if they do that, and the one of the positions that the Kings have plenty of options to fill that role, we just talked about Gabe Vilardi, Samuel Fagemo, Rasmus Kapari. Right. I mean, there's a lot of options that could slot in. Jared Anderson-Dolan that can fill a role on the wing. So love me some Alex Iafallo. Don't get me wrong. But if to fit Jersey and Anderson in, that's a route they go. It's not as if they don't have a plethora of options to play in that.
Absolutely. Spot. Yeah, absolutely.
Richard, I'll pick one of your questions here, and I like this one. How much does the new assistant coach have to prove? If the power play is better, then is it mission accomplished?
Does he have the least pressure out of anybody? It can't get worse, right? The power play? There's just no way.
Well, I mean, he's getting a little lucky coming in with Kevin Fiala now on the team as opposed to last year. So
that's the thing.
All the injuries.
You brought in Fiala too. Like, man, I would say it has to get better by default. But no, I don't want to harp on this, but let's not just blame 100% of the power play on the assistant coach. I don't buy that. Like the head coach, they're involved in some fashion. Whether they're in the meetings, they're watching the video, they're having the conversations, they're having a cup of coffee when they first get to the rink, putting their gear on, the skates on, in the coach's room, saying, debating and talking about, and they're on the whiteboard trying to figure out what may work best. So to think that the head coach isn't involved in that, he is. So I don't want to put it solely on the assistant coach, but
I'll disagree with you. Okay. Yeah, I'll disagree with you.
All that said, given where the power play was, obviously there's pressure on. You want that to improve.
I'll disagree with you a little bit because when they hired T-Mac, Marco Sturm was already in the organization, right? And I think it felt like they were grooming Sturm to be a head coach of somewhere where this is Rob Blake handpicking this guy. I'm assuming T-Mac had a lot to say about it. Like I think it's a little bit more pressure than just having a guy already in the organization. I remember the introductory interviews with Todd McClellan talking about Marco Sturm. He's like, yeah, he's here. And like, we haven't really got a chance to talk and all this kind of stuff. And like, what's the only role, right? And this guy has been brought in solely for this role that has been available. And T-Mac had some say in that. I think that's where the pressure comes in because when you get hired, you're hired to do a job. Like where Marco Sturm felt like, okay, we need him to be in the organization because we want to groom him to potentially be the next head coach. This is the only spot available. Like, we'll see how it works out. Where this is a handpicked guy getting brought in to do one thing.
Yeah, I think
we're assuming he's getting brought in to do one thing.
I think that's what I think the team actually mentioned, that he's going to be focusing on the power play when they released the press release was available. So, but yeah, I'm with you, Joe. The thing with I was never on board with blaming Sturm or being so hard on Sturm for all the power play woes last season. I mean, we've talked about this before. You lose almost a full season of Drew Doughty and almost a full season of Sean Walker, who were expected to be your top power play quarterbacks all year. I mean, and then the Kings never really felt like they had the talent to be a good power play team. I mean, we talked about this on nauseam. It's just they don't really have those creative type players. I mean, now that we're starting to see Kempe develop into a strong goal scorer, you have Kevin Fiala now. We'll see what happens with Arthur Kaliyev in another year. So yeah, you're just kind of hoping for a little bit more improvement because I mean I think there's probably going to be a little bit more pressure on Hiller to make a more of an improvement on the power play than there was on Sturm at that time because now there really I guess is no excuse to have a poor power play. You have some good skilled talent in the top six that should be able to be successful in the power play. So I'm looking more on the penalty kill. I think the penalty kill needs to be way better. I mean, the Kings. You look at all those players all the players on the team. Iafallo, Deneau, Lizotte. I mean, Moore. All these players just scream elite level penalty killers. I mean, Trevor Moore led the NHL in shorthanded goals, so that was good. But there needs to be more of an emphasis on improving the penalty kill than there needs to be on improving the power play.
Why was it that it just seemed that, and I guess that's not to say the penalty kill went totally unnoticed or not criticized, but man, the power play, it just seemed to got disproportionately hit on way more than the penalty kill, which was pretty bad.
Yeah, well. And that was
and
so
Yanni was Team X guy that he got brought in to do this. Like that's.
Yeah, that was so surprising to me. I mean, everybody was so focused on the power play, and I think a lot of it was because of where Arthur Kaliyev was playing, Andre Kopitar's positioning, and it seemed a little bit more. I mean, you just kind of watched the power play, and it just was lackluster at best at times. So, but with the penalty kill, I mean, there were so many mental mistakes just happening, like missed coverage and cross-ice passes that were just going through that just so I were like, what is going on? And that's why I have focused more on that than I did on the power play because I mean these players just like I said they just scream penalty kill type players where they're aggressive on the puck, they're constantly putting on pressure. So I'm hoping to see more pressure because there's a lot of skaters that can skate really well on the Kings. I mean, like I just mentioned with Moore and Lizotte and Deneau, they're all really good skaters. So I'm hoping to see a little bit more pressure on and penalty kill in their own zone, and I think that would improve the percentage as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting season. Well, that'll be it. Thank you guys for watching. We got articles getting pumped out every day at hockeyroyalty.com. Go get your gear for the upcoming season at the Hockey Royalty team store. Articles flowing out daily. Joe popped one out yesterday, the new top prospects article by Ryan Sykes coming out tomorrow. Keep you guys coming. Episodes weekly. Camp's going to be starting up. We might be seeing maybe 2 episodes a week if we can fit it in. You're not going to starve for Kings news, I tell you that. So we'll keep it coming, keep it flowing fast and furious. Thank you, boys, for joining me here. And as always, go Kings, go.
Go Kings.